My name is Audrey Collins. I am 38 years old. And the day my marriage officially ended, my mother-in-law looked me in the eye and said leaving me was the greatest decision her son had ever made. 5 minutes later, she wished those words had never left her mouth. So did my husband. Until that morning, I believed Ethan had simply stopped loving me. That was the story everyone accepted. We had drifted apart. We wanted different futures. We were ending things like two mature adults. I repeated those words so many times that I almost convinced myself they were true. Almost. For 14 years, I had been the woman who carried everyone else's weight. I remembered birthdays, paid bills on time, smoothed over family arguments, helped Ethan build his construction company from a tiny office in our garage into a respected local business. I never asked whose name was on the success. I thought we were building it together. Then Patricia arrived. She didn't knock. She walked straight into my kitchen carrying a leather folder as if she owned the house. She sat down across from me and folded her hands. There wasn't an ounce of sympathy on her face, only satisfaction. She smiled and said Ethan finally opened his eyes. Leaving you was the best decision my son has ever made. The room went silent. I stared at the bracelet around her wrist. I knew that bracelet. I had spent 3 months saving for it, because Ethan said his mother deserved something special for her birthday. Funny how generosity always seemed to come from my paycheck. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Then my phone rang. Rebecca Lawson, the senior accountant who had worked beside me for years at Ethan's company. I answered immediately. Audrey. Her voice was shaking. Please tell me you're alone. I glanced at Patricia. Not exactly. Rebecca took a slow breath. Then check your email before anyone leaves that house. Right now. I opened the message. There were bank statements, property transfers, corporate filings, and one document that made my hands go numb. My name was on it. So was my signature. Except, I had never signed a single page. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It truly helps this channel reach more people who love emotional family stories like these. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in her place? I'm curious to read your thoughts. Rebecca spoke again. Audrey, Ethan didn't divorce you because he fell out of love. He divorced you because someone was about to discover where millions of dollars had disappeared. I slowly lifted my eyes toward Patricia. The smile was gone. She looked terrified. And in that moment, I realized she hadn't come to celebrate my downfall. She had come to make sure I never learned the truth. Rebecca stayed silent for a few seconds. I could hear her breathing. Then she lowered her voice. Audrey, do not let Patricia leave. And whatever you do, don't tell Ethan you know anything yet. The call ended. I looked back at Patricia. She had already noticed the color had drained from my face. What is it? She asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. Normally, I would have answered. Normally, I would have apologized for making the room uncomfortable. Instead, I locked my phone and slid it onto the table. Why are you really here, Patricia? She laughed. That dry little laugh I had heard for almost 15 years. To make sure you accept reality like an adult. Ethan deserves happiness. You never gave him that. Her words hurt. Not because I believed them anymore, because I had believed them for years. Every criticism, every backhanded compliment, every holiday where she praised another woman while pretending I wasn't sitting at the same table. I spent 14 years trying to become enough for someone who had already decided I never would be. Looking back now, I realized Patricia never wanted a daughter-in-law. She wanted another person she could control. And I made it easy. When Ethan wanted to leave his stable job and start a construction company, everyone told him he was making a mistake. I was the only one who believed in him. I emptied my savings account. $48,000. Money I had inherited from my grandfather. Money I had planned to use as a down payment on our forever home. Instead, I invested it in Ethan's dream. We agreed it was our company, not his, ours. I handled payroll, invoices, taxes, insurance renewals, vendor contracts. If a client complimented the company, Ethan accepted the praise. If something went wrong, he quietly pushed the problem onto me. I told myself that was just marriage. Partnership meant sacrifice. At least that's what I kept repeating. Patricia loved reminding everyone that her son was self-made. Every time she said those words, I smiled politely. No one corrected her. Not even Ethan, especially not Ethan. 3 years ago, I noticed something strange. Large transfers appearing briefly in one operating account before disappearing into another company I didn't recognize. When I asked Ethan about them, he kissed my forehead. Business restructuring, sweetheart. You'd hate the boring details. I hated how quickly I accepted that answer even more. Over time, more things stopped making sense. Properties purchased under limited liability companies, equipment leases that never appeared on job sites, invoices from contractors I had never met. Whenever I asked questions, Ethan became irritated. You're overthinking everything. You always assume the worst. Eventually, I stopped asking. Not because I trusted him, because I was tired of defending my own instincts. Then Rebecca joined the accounting department. Unlike me, she didn't have emotional history clouding her judgment. She questioned numbers without worrying about hurting anyone's feelings. Within 6 months, Ethan transferred most financial approvals away from her. He said it was to simplify operations. Rebecca disagreed, quietly, professionally. She never accused anyone. She simply kept copies of everything she was legally allowed to keep. Now I understood why. Patricia stood from her chair and reached for her purse. Well, I've said what I came to say. I think it's best if we don't see each other for a while. I stepped between her and the front door. Not aggressively, just enough that she stopped walking. You're leaving already, she frowned. Move, Audrey. I folded my arms. Not until you answer one question. Her expression hardened. What question did Ethan tell you why he really divorced me? For the first time since she had entered my house, Patricia hesitated, only for a second. But I saw it. Then she looked away. He told me enough. No, I said quietly, he didn't. Because if he had, you wouldn't have walked in here smiling. She gripped her purse tighter. I don't know what game you're playing. Neither do I. Not yet. But I intend to find out every single rule. She tried to brush past me. Before she reached the door, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Rebecca. Only this time it wasn't documents. It was a single sentence. Don't trust the divorce settlement. Page 17 is the key. Ethan never expected you to read it. I stared at the notification for several long seconds. Page 17. Such a strangely specific number. Most people never read past the first few pages of a divorce settlement. I almost hadn't. Ethan knew me well enough to expect that. During our marriage, I trusted contracts because I trusted him. If he told me everything was standard, I signed. Not this time. I walked back to the dining table without taking my eyes off Patricia. She had stopped pretending to leave. Now she looked nervous, almost impatient. What did Rebecca send you? She asked. I ignored the question. Instead, I opened the settlement agreement Ethan's attorney had emailed 3 days earlier. 32 pages, dense legal language, endless paragraphs. I had skimmed the first 10 pages before giving up. Now I scrolled directly to page 17. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed a paragraph highlighted by Rebecca. One sentence. One tiny sentence buried between 2 pages discussing marital assets. The wife acknowledges that she has had full access to all financial records of Collins Development Group and voluntarily waives any future claims regarding undisclosed business assets existing before the date of this agreement. I read it again, then again. My stomach tightened. That sentence had nothing to do with dividing property. It wasn't protecting the company. It was protecting Ethan. If I signed, I could never challenge assets I didn't even know existed. Patricia finally spoke. Close the document. Her voice was sharp, almost desperate. I looked up slowly. Why? Because it's over. Accept the settlement and move on. You'll only make things harder for yourself. I leaned back in my chair. Funny. For someone who keeps saying the divorce is finished, you seem awfully interested in whether I read one particular page. She didn't answer. That silence told me more than words ever could. I stood and walked toward the living room window. Outside, the street looked completely ordinary. Children rode bicycles. A neighbor watered flowers. A delivery truck stopped across the road. Meanwhile, my entire marriage was unraveling one hidden document at a time. My phone rang again. Rebecca. This time, I put her on speaker. Audrey, is Patricia still there? She is. Good. Then let her hear this. Rebecca took a breath. Yesterday I found a storage server that wasn't listed in the company inventory. Someone forgot to remove an old backup before wiping the accounting system. I recovered thousands of archived files, invoices, internal emails, wire transfers, everything. Patricia closed her eyes. Rebecca continued. The money wasn't disappearing. It was being moved into shell companies owned by people connected to Ethan. Some of those companies were registered years before your divorce was even mentioned. Which means, I whispered. Which means he planned this long before he asked for a divorce. Exactly. My knees felt weak. For months I had blamed myself. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I wasn't affectionate enough. Maybe we had simply become different people. Every lonely night, every tear, every apology I made for problems I didn't create. It had all been built on a lie. Patricia suddenly reached for her handbag. I have nothing to do with Ethan's business. Rebecca spoke before I could answer. That's not true. There was complete silence. Rebecca continued carefully. Patricia Collins is listed as director of 3 holding companies. Her signature appears on multiple property acquisitions, including the lake house. The lake house. My mind froze. Ethan had told me we couldn't afford one. For 5 years he repeated the same excuse. Maybe someday. Not yet. We're being responsible. The whole time. He already owned one. Just not with me. Patricia's face had turned completely white. She grabbed her keys. You need to stop listening to that woman. She's lying. Rebecca laughed once. A cold laugh. Then explain why I also recovered security footage from the office. Footage recorded the night before the accounting servers were erased. There's only one person on those recordings. Ethan. And someone standing beside him. I slowly turned toward Patricia. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked frightened. Genuinely frightened. Then Rebecca said the words that changed everything. Audrey. There's one more file. I haven't opened it yet because I wanted you there when I do. It's labeled Emergency Plan if Audrey refuses to sign. My heart stopped. Because whatever was inside that file, Ethan had written it before he ever walked out of our marriage. I couldn't breathe. Not because I was scared. Because everything suddenly fit together. The divorce, the pressure, the carefully prepared documents, the fake sympathy. None of it had happened by chance. Someone had written a plan for the possibility that I refused to disappear quietly. I looked at Patricia. She was already reaching for the front door. Don't leave, I said. She didn't even turn around. This is between you and Ethan. No, I answered calmly. It stopped being just between us the moment your name appeared on those companies. She froze. Only for a second. Then she grabbed the doorknob. I spoke before she could open it. Did you know he forged my signature? Her shoulders stiffened. Did you know he moved company assets before filing for divorce? No answer. Did you know he planned this for years? She slowly turned toward me. There were tears in her eyes. Real ones. For the first time since I had met her 14 years ago, Patricia looked old. Much older than 70. I never wanted it to go this far, she whispered. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a denial, it was an admission. Rebecca remained on speaker. Audrey, don't argue with her, just listen, let her talk. Patricia lowered herself into the chair as if her legs had suddenly lost their strength. You don't understand Ethan, she said quietly. He's always believed losing was impossible, even as a little boy. If someone beat him at anything, he found another way to win. If he broke something, he blamed someone else. His father used to say we were raising a boy who thought consequences were for other people. I listened without interrupting. She stared at the floor. After his father died, I protected him too much. Every mistake, every debt, every bad decision. I cleaned it up. At first I thought I was helping. Then, I didn't know how to stop. The words hurt more than I expected. Not because they excused Ethan, because they explained him. She had spent decades rescuing him. I had simply taken over the job after our wedding. Rebecca broke the silence. Patricia, did Ethan tell you about the offshore accounts? Patricia's head snapped upward. Offshore. What accounts? Rebecca didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said something that made my blood run cold. Then he lied to you too. Patricia frowned. What are you talking about? There aren't 3 shell companies. There are 9. And millions of dollars were transferred overseas 6 months ago. Your companies were only temporary holding accounts. You weren't the final destination. Patricia looked genuinely confused. No, that's impossible. He said. She stopped speaking. What did he say? I asked. She closed her eyes. He said everything would eventually belong to our family. He said he was protecting it from you. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. He had manipulated both of us, in different ways. I was the obstacle. She was the tool. Neither of us knew the entire story. Rebecca spoke again. Audrey. I opened the emergency file. My heart pounded. Tell me. There was a long pause. Then Rebecca read the first line exactly as it appeared. If Audrey refuses to sign the settlement, proceed with Phase 2. I felt a chill spread across my arms. Continue. Phase 2 includes initiating claims that Audrey mishandled company funds and breached fiduciary responsibilities while serving as financial administrator. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was going to accuse me. Using my own job. Using the work I had done to build his company. Rebecca continued reading. Supporting documents have been prepared. Witness statements have been drafted. Media response has been coordinated if necessary. I slowly sat down. Every accusation, already written. Every lie, already prepared. Months before he even asked for a divorce, Patricia whispered one sentence. My God, he was planning to destroy you, Rebecca answered quietly. No, he was planning to make it impossible for her to defend herself. Silence filled the house. Finally, I asked the question neither of them expected. Rebecca, if he prepared false evidence, can we prove it's false? She didn't hesitate. Yes. Because Ethan forgot one thing. He trusted computers more than people. Every document has metadata. Every edit, every timestamp, every deleted version. The files tell the truth. And they tell it in chronological order. For the first time all day, I felt something stronger than fear. Hope, not blind hope. Evidence. Real evidence. The kind judges believe. The kind investigators follow. The kind liars cannot explain away. Then my front door opened. Neither Patricia nor I had touched it. A familiar voice echoed through the hallway. Audrey, we need to talk. I recognized Ethan before I even turned around, but when I finally faced him, I realized he wasn't alone. Ethan stood in my entryway, wearing the same navy suit he always chose for important meetings. Perfect tie, perfect posture, perfect smile. The smile disappeared the second he saw his mother sitting at my dining table. Beside him stood a man in an expensive gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized him immediately. Martin Graves, the attorney who had prepared every document for our divorce. Neither of them had expected to find Patricia still there. Neither of them knew Rebecca was listening. Ethan recovered first. Audrey, I called before coming. You didn't answer. I folded my arms. That doesn't explain why you used your spare key. He reached into his pocket. Habit. I forgot. No. He hadn't forgotten. He wanted to remind me that he still believed he had access to my life. Not anymore. Leave the key on the counter. His eyebrows lifted. Excuse me. The house is legally mine until the settlement is finalized. Leave the key. Now. Without another word, he placed it on the kitchen island. For the first time in years, he had followed one of my instructions. Martin cleared his throat. Mrs. Collins, we're here to discuss a misunderstanding before it becomes unnecessarily expensive, Rebecca whispered through the speaker. He's nervous. Lawyers only use that tone when they're trying to stop something before it reaches court. I left the phone exactly where it was. A misunderstanding, I repeated. Is that what we're calling forged signatures now? Martin's expression barely changed. I don't know what you've been told, I smiled. Good. Then let's avoid rumors. I opened the email again and rotated the phone toward them. The forged authorization, the altered banking records, the transfer logs. Every page, every signature, every date. Ethan's face didn't change, but his eyes did. Only for an instant. Enough. Enough for me. He hadn't expected me to have copies. Martin closed the phone with one gentle movement. Those documents appear incomplete. Rebecca laughed through the speaker. Actually, they're complete. I have the server backups too. Silence. Martin slowly turned toward the phone. And who exactly is this Rebecca Lawson? Senior accountant, former senior accountant after your client illegally locked me out yesterday morning. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rebecca. This doesn't concern you, she ignored him. I also preserved every deleted accounting archive before your IT contractor wiped the server. I imagine investigators will appreciate that. Martin looked at Ethan, only 1 second. That single glance said everything. He hadn't known. Not all of it. He leaned closer to Ethan and whispered something I couldn't hear. Ethan answered without lowering his voice. She can't prove intent. Rebecca answered before Martin could. Actually, I can. Every revised contract contains embedded timestamps. Every draft. Every edit. Including the document where your office changed Audrey's waiver 3 weeks after it had supposedly been finalized. Martin slowly looked back at Ethan. You told me those revisions came from your wife. Ethan stayed silent. The attorney's face hardened. Did they still silence? Martin took one slow breath. Then another. Finally, he removed several folders from his briefcase. He looked at me instead of Ethan. Mrs. Collins, I believe this meeting is over. I blinked. What he turned toward Ethan. You failed to disclose material facts to legal counsel. If these allegations are accurate, I cannot continue representing you. Ethan stared at him. Don't be ridiculous. Sit down, we're finishing this. Martin closed the briefcase. No, I'm protecting my license. His voice remained calm. Professional. Cold. You instructed my office using information that may have been intentionally false. If that's confirmed, I become part of your problem. That won't happen. He picked up his briefcase. Effective immediately, you need new counsel. He walked to the front door. Without looking back, without another word, the door closed. The room became painfully quiet. Ethan slowly turned toward me. His confidence had cracked. Only slightly, but I saw it. He looked at Patricia. Mom, say something. She didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope, and placed it on the table. I frowned. What's that? Her voice trembled. The only thing I never gave Ethan. A copy of his father's final letter. Ethan's entire body froze. No, he whispered. Mom, don't. Patricia looked directly at me. Your father-in-law left instructions the day before he died. Instructions Ethan was never supposed to ignore. He broke every single one. I slowly reached for the envelope. It had never been opened. The seal was still intact. Patricia's hands were shaking. She whispered only 5 words. Read it before anyone else does. I held the envelope carefully. The paper had yellowed with age. The corners were worn. It looked as though Patricia had carried it for years, without ever finding the courage to open it again. Ethan took 1 step toward me. Don't. His voice cracked. Please, Audrey. For the first time since I had met him, there was no confidence left. No carefully rehearsed explanation. No charming smile. Only fear. Real fear. That alone told me the letter mattered. I slipped 1 finger beneath the seal. Patricia quietly said, Your father asked me to give this to you only if Ethan ever betrayed the values our family was built on. I prayed that day would never come. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Robert Collins had always written in neat block letters that looked almost printed. Audrey, if you are reading this, then I have failed to prevent something I feared for many years. Ethan is intelligent, ambitious, determined. But since childhood he has confused success with ownership. He believes that if he wants something badly enough, it becomes his. That belief frightened me more than I ever admitted aloud. I glanced toward Ethan. He looked away. The letter continued. If Ethan ever asks you to sign documents without fully understanding them, refuse. If he ever pressures you into silence, speak. If he ever convinces you that your work belongs only to him, remember this. The company exists because both of you built it, not because he dreamed it. I swallowed hard. My eyes blurred. Robert had seen me. Years before anyone else had. He had understood exactly what my role had been. The next paragraph changed everything. My attorney holds the original partnership agreement signed before Collins Development Group was incorporated. Ownership was intentionally divided equally between Ethan and Audrey, regardless of future corporate restructuring. No amendment is valid unless both original partners knowingly consent in person before independent legal witnesses. I stopped reading. The room became perfectly still. Rebecca gasped through the speaker. "Oh my God," Patricia covered her mouth. Ethan closed his eyes, very slowly, as though the weight of 14 years had finally landed on his shoulders. I looked up. "Equal partners." He nodded once. "Barely. The original agreement." "I thought Dad destroyed it," Patricia whispered. "He didn't. He trusted Thomas, Robert's attorney, a man who had retired almost 8 years earlier. I remembered him, quiet, methodical, always carrying a notebook. I also remembered Ethan saying Thomas had misplaced several old files after retirement. Apparently, that had been another lie. Rebecca immediately began typing. "Audrey, give me 1 minute. I know exactly where Thomas transferred his records. If the archive still exists..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Ethan suddenly walked toward me. Slowly. "Audrey, listen to me. Everything got out of control. I never wanted..." I raised my hand. He stopped speaking. "No. You're going to listen now. For 14 years, I defended you. I defended you to your employees, to your clients, to your mother, to myself. Every time something felt wrong, I convinced myself I was imagining it, because loving someone meant trusting them. You used that trust like it was another company asset." He lowered his head. I continued. "Do you know what hurts the most? Not the money. Not even the lies. It's realizing that every sacrifice I made became another tool you used against me. Every late night, every vacation I canceled, every paycheck I reinvested. I was building our future. You were planning my exit." He looked genuinely ashamed. Maybe for the first time in his life, but shame wasn't enough anymore. My phone vibrated. Rebecca again. "Audrey, I found Thomas. He's alive. Retired in Vermont. And I already spoke with his assistant." There was another pause. Then she laughed. A relieved laugh this time. "He kept everything, every original agreement, every handwritten amendment, every witness certification. Nothing was lost. Nothing." Ethan leaned against the wall. His face turned pale, because he finally understood what I understood. The forged signatures no longer mattered most. The hidden accounts no longer mattered most. The divorce settlement no longer mattered most. The very foundation of his entire plan had just collapsed. There was one last sound. 3 firm knocks on the front door. Not hurried, not aggressive, professional. I opened it. 2 investigators stood on my porch. One held a folder. The other looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Collins, we'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an ongoing financial fraud investigation." Ethan didn't move. Neither did I. For the first time in 14 years, I stepped aside instead of standing in front of him. The taller investigator removed a leather badge holder from his jacket. "Mrs. Collins, I'm Special Agent Daniel Mercer. This is Investigator Helen Brooks. We're sorry to arrive unannounced." I nodded and stepped farther aside. "Please come in." Neither of them rushed. Neither of them looked dramatic. They carried themselves like people who had already spent months putting together a puzzle. They didn't need guesses anymore, only confirmation. Mercer looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Collins, you are not under arrest. Not today. But we'd like your cooperation." Ethan forced a smile. "Of course. What's this about?" Mercer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed a thick folder on my dining table. I noticed my own name printed on the cover. Collins Development Group Financial Review. My heart skipped. They had been investigating long before Rebecca called me. Helen Brooks looked at me. "Mrs. Collins, before we continue, we need to ask one question. Did you knowingly authorize these transfers?" She slid several documents toward me. The same forged signatures, the same fake approvals, but now each page carried colored notes, digital analysis, ink comparisons, date discrepancies. Someone had already examined everything. I answered without hesitation. "No, I have never seen these documents before today." Mercer nodded once. "That's consistent with our findings." Ethan interrupted. "This is ridiculous. Those are company records. Audrey handled accounting for years. Mercer calmly opened another folder. Actually, no. He removed a printed report. Every login to your accounting software was traced. Every password change, every remote access, every deleted file. Most activity occurred under Audrey's account. Ethan crossed his arms. Exactly, Mercer continued. While Audrey was physically attending a conference in Chicago, 3 different times, your passport records, hotel check-ins, credit card transactions, and conference security footage confirmed she was over 800 miles away. Yet someone logged into her account from your office, using your executive credentials to override security alerts. Silence. Heavy silence. Rebecca quietly whispered through the phone, "He's finished." Mercer looked toward the speaker. "Miss Lawson, thank you for preserving the backups. Without them, this investigation would have taken much longer." Rebecca sounded surprised. "You already knew." Helen smiled. "We've known about suspicious transactions for nearly 11 months. We just couldn't determine who inside the company was responsible." Then the backup server appeared. Everything changed. I stared at them. 11 months. While I was still cooking dinner every night, planning anniversary trips, wondering why Ethan seemed distant. Federal investigators had already been watching the business we built together. Ethan finally lost his composure. "This is insane. You're twisting normal business operations into crimes." Mercer remained perfectly calm. "Then perhaps you'll have no problem explaining this." He produced one final document, a wire transfer, $7.4 million, destination, Cayman Islands, authorization, Ethan Collins, witness signature, Patricia Collins. Patricia gasped. "No, I never signed that." Mercer turned another page. "We know. Your signature was forged too." Patricia slowly looked at her son. "You forged?" "Mine." Ethan said nothing. She took one trembling step backward. "All these years, I defended you. I lied for you. I believed you. And you stole from me too." He finally spoke. "Mom, I was going to put everything back." She laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was the sound of a lifetime of denial breaking apart. "You sound exactly like your father feared you would." The room fell silent again. Mercer closed the folders. "Mr. Collins, at this point I'd strongly recommend speaking only through legal counsel." Ethan looked around the room. At his mother, at the investigators, at the empty chair where his attorney had been sitting less than an hour earlier. Finally, at me. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, only defeat. "Audrey, I'm sorry," the words hung in the air. 14 years, thousands of lies, millions of dollars. One simple apology. I realized something unexpected. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no triumph, no desire to punish him. Just relief. Because I no longer needed him to admit the truth. The truth was already sitting on my dining table in a stack of evidence. Mercer nodded toward the front door. "Mr. Collins, would you come with us, please? This time." Ethan didn't argue. He quietly walked past me. As he reached the doorway, he stopped. Without turning around, he said softly, "Dad was right about you. I should have made you my partner, not my opponent." The front door closed behind him. The house became completely still. Patricia remained seated, staring at the unopened photo frame on my bookshelf. Finally, she whispered, "I spent my whole life protecting my son. I never realized I was protecting him from becoming a decent man." I didn't answer. Some truths don't need a response. They only need silence. A week later, Thomas, Robert's retired attorney, arrived carrying 2 weathered archive boxes. Inside was every original agreement, every handwritten note, every witness statement Robert had preserved. The first document he handed me was the original partnership contract. 50%. My name, his signature, Robert's signature, witnessed and notarized, exactly as he had promised in his letter. That single document changed everything. The divorce settlement was withdrawn. The civil lawsuits were rewritten. The company ownership was restored according to the original agreement. Over the following months, investigators recovered nearly every hidden asset. Properties, accounts, equipment, funds. Some money was gone forever. Most of it wasn't. The court later ruled that I had been an equal owner from the very beginning. Not because of sympathy, Because the evidence left no other conclusion, I sold my share of the company shortly after. Not because I was forced to, because I wanted a life that no longer reminded me of surviving. I bought a smaller home, started consulting for family-owned businesses, helping spouses protect themselves before trust became paperwork. Rebecca became one of my closest friends. She likes to joke that one forgotten backup server changed both our lives. Maybe she's right. Patricia wrote me several letters over the following year. I answered only one. Not because I hated her, because forgiveness doesn't always mean rebuilding a relationship. Sometimes it simply means putting down the weight someone else handed you. Today, when people ask how I found the strength to rebuild after losing everything, I always smile. Because the truth is, I never lost everything. I only lost the illusion that loyalty requires silence. The day I stopped protecting everyone else at the expense of myself was the day my real life finally began. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe because I share a brand new family story here every single day. And if you're not ready to leave yet, open the next story on your screen. I have a feeling it will stay with you just as long.